Good morning, everyone. This is Randy I, and today I am at the famous Trinity College in Dublin, Ireland, a place where so many geniuses graduated and studied. I'm here today to talk about why there are so few geniuses in the world today. Certainly, I don't think there is a lack of geniuses who walked this particular campus and who graduated, who studied here. Some very famous alumni from Trinity College: Samuel Beckett, Oscar Wilde, Jonathan Swift, Bram Stoker. The list goes on. This institution is responsible for a large number of Nobel Prize laureates in humanities, literature, science, and other fields. It is a monster when it comes to churning out individual humans, individuals of intellectual superiority, geniuses. Right, that this institution has churned out many geniuses in its hallowed history, and presumably continues to do so. But a big question that I often think about, and that is often asked, is why are there so few geniuses in the world today? Let me ask you this question. Can you think of a genius? How would you define that? If I were to ask you, think about a genius. Who comes to mind when I say genius? Perhaps for a lot of people, it's Einstein. That's the first. That's the first person that many people think of is Albert Einstein, who, with his scientific theories, the theory of relativity, overturned the Newtonian world and created a new paradigm, a new foundation for science and our understanding of physics, and helped shape our modern understanding of scientific thought. So Einstein comes to mind, but who else? Now, is there a living genius? Can you think of someone right now who is alive, who is a genius? Maybe. I think the closest thing that for the average person that would come to mind is maybe Stephen Hawking, who passed away a couple years ago. So this video is being made in 2024. So Stephen Hawking passed away a couple years ago. So maybe Hawking, but anyone else? Can you think of a literary genius, an artistic genius, an intellectual genius? Do these names? Is that easy for you? For you to come up with these names, or is that more difficult, or can you only think of a couple of geniuses? I mean, this is obviously subject to debate, subject to interpretation. Perhaps you can think of many geniuses. Perhaps you consider yourself a genius. Who knows? But there is this common idea, certainly shared by many, that there are now fewer geniuses in the world, and we're not producing as many, which is surprising, right? Because with the internet, we have freedom of information. Information is now more accessible to greater numbers of people. Most countries, or at least a large number of countries, are democratic, which instilled in that type of political system allows knowledge to pass without authoritarian control. There is, at least in most places, a free press and lack of censorship, although that is somewhat changing in certain parts of the world. There is more egalitarianism and more education opportunities for women, for racialized minorities, for people of all walks of life, now more so than ever, it seems, in the world, or at least especially in the Western world. So where have all the geniuses gone? If there's so much information, if everybody is equal, and if there are all these education opportunities, then we should be popping out geniuses right, left, and center. There should be new scientific discoveries, new literary masterpieces, new monumental artistic works being produced on a daily basis, right? If this theory is true, that we have such a wonderful foundation for education and for thought and for freedom of thought. But maybe it's not. So today I'm going to share with you 3 different perspectives. So the first perspective is that in fact there are many modern geniuses. It's just that we don't currently recognize them. And I'll explain why we don't currently recognize them. The second theory is that, in fact, we are producing fewer geniuses. And the level of genius has fallen. And truly, we are churning out fewer and fewer and fewer. And maybe we will stop producing them. So that's the second perspective I'm going to explain in the second part of this video. And then the third perspective I'm going to share is the future of genius and the future of human intellectual thought and progress relative to the rise of artificial intelligence and new forms of sentience that are non-human, and what that means and the implications of that. So let's start with the first perspective. The first perspective being that, in fact, there are many geniuses, but we don't recognize them. So why is that? Well, there could be some form of recognition bias. And what I mean by recognition bias is that the geniuses currently exist, but we do not yet recognize them, in the sense that, you know, they're there, they're producing their works, but it takes time. So, for example, Vincent van Gogh, right, or sometimes anglicized as Vincent van Gogh, is commonly known and recognized as an artistic genius. He's the painter behind Sunflowers, Starry, Starry Night. All right, commonly recognized by the majority, I believe, of the world as being an artistic genius. But during his lifetime, Vincent van Gogh failed to sell any of his works. I think he sold one. Maybe didn't fail to sell any of his works, but failed to sell any significant number of his works. He sold 1 or 2. And to his brother Theo, right, who was an art collector. So, and he was put into a mental asylum. He cut off his own ear, had a very tragic life. And during his lifetime, he was certainly not recognized as a genius, or even as a sane person. But subsequent to his death, he built a reputation. Maybe he didn't build the reputation, but others recognized the value of his work, and he developed a reputation as being a genius. So we could have these Vincent van Goghs running around in the world right now producing their works, and nobody recognizes it, or very few people recognize the genius of these people, because only through the lens of historic perspective and time do we recognize the genius and the contributions. Another example would be Johann Sebastian Bach, right? Very, very famous composer, probably in the top 3, along with Mozart and Beethoven, as being the most influential classical musical composer in Western music. is Johann Sebastian Bach. During his lifetime, he was well recognized, but not beyond his own community. He lived in what would be now Germany, although Germany as a country did not exist at the time. It was something else, because Germany was only unified in the 1860s. So it would have been the territory of modern-day Germany where he lived. And he didn't travel very much. He traveled within his own community, but didn't really go that far, right? I think by some estimates he never traveled more than maybe 100 kilometers in his lifetime outside of where he was born. Who knows? I mean, no one's going to measure this, but he didn't travel that far by most estimates. Now, he was certainly famous. He was an organist. He was a composer, and he composed a lot of church music and music for his own community. And certainly he was famous within his community, but he didn't become world famous until much later. In the 1800s, there was another composer by the name of Felix Mendelssohn, who really helped with the revitalization of the works of Johann Sebastian Bach. Right, so 200 years later, because Bach did most of his work in the 1600s, 200 years later he was recognized. Not to say he wasn't recognized, but he was really put on an intellectual pedestal, and there was a revival and a renewed interest in him. And thanks to the work of subsequent composers like Felix Mendelssohn and perhaps others, Johann Sebastian Bach became known as the genius that he is today, and he became recognized. So that took him 200 years, right? So it's very plausible that there are many individuals out here walking around doing their work today, some of them perhaps even at Trinity College, who are just not yet recognized as genius. Because it takes time. It takes time to recognize genius. Plus, genius requires some level of historic lens in terms of the full implications of one's work. You see, for example, people who win Nobel Prizes, they don't win it the year they come up with that discovery or the invention, or the year they write their work. I think that's very rare that happens. It takes a certain amount of time. Bob Dylan, for example, recently won a Nobel Prize, and it took him years to get that prize. And for certain scientists who come up with very important scientific discoveries, it takes some years to eventually get that prize, to get that recognition, and maybe a further number of decades, if not centuries, for humanity to recognize how truly significant these contributions were. So without the lens of historic, without the hindsight of history, it's hard to know who is the genius of today, because we're living in the present. Now, there's another way of looking at this, which is we're not producing fewer geniuses. It's just that we in the present are competing with the who's who, list, the best rock star list, the cream of the crop of the past, right? And this is often you get this comment, music today is not as good as music in the past, and these type of comments. Well, to an extent, you're competing with the best of the past, right? You're not competing with a period in the past. It's not like 2024 versus 1733, right? I'm just randomly choosing a date in the past. It's not like, who has the best composers, 1733 or 2024, right? It's 2024 versus our collective human history of all the artists, composers, literary giants who've produced works, monumental works. So it's a little bit unfair from that perspective to say that we don't have geniuses, because we're competing against all of humanity, right? Everybody who's ever had intellectual contribution. So it's unfair. So there's a bit of a bias here. I call it recognition bias, which is that, again, the geniuses are walking around today. We just don't recognize them. So that's the first perspective, which is a very comforting perspective, that the geniuses are there. Just give them time, don't be overly judgmental, and they will arise in due time and be recognized by future generations. Now, the second perspective that I'm going to share with you today, I think is more interesting, which is the opposite perspective, and that is truly there are fewer geniuses being made today relative to the past for different reasons, many of them being systemic or structural issues. So the first theory that I want to share is this theory that I came up with called collective competition. And what I mean by collective competition is everybody competing for everything at the same time, and most people being fairly qualified to compete for whatever they're competing for. And what I mean by that is that in the past, there was actually less competition. If you think of the geniuses in the past and who they had to compete with, right? Most people were, in large stretches of the past, were illiterate. Many fields of study were not yet developed. They were nascent. And there was more opportunities for pioneers, and therefore less competition. Right? At the time of Newton, the Catholic Church, for example, had still a significant sway over scientific thought, right? And that, and I think it's commonly recognized, it certainly stifled scientific thought, right? Certain people like Galileo were forced to recant by virtue of pressure from the church. Certain scientific minds were suppressed by religious authorities, by political authorities. So, those who managed to make it, those who managed to change the way that we thought, well, they had less competition. So in a way, it's one of the phenomenons of having a world where you have freedom of information, you have everybody being educated, you have more qualification, is that you have more competition. And it is harder for you to stand out when there's more competition. I'll give an example just from my own personal life. I run a law firm in Toronto. And it's very competitive for students to get positions at law firms. So I reject dozens of applications on a yearly basis from very qualified law students who want to work at my law firm. Now I have to, because I can't hire all of them. But these people are very smart, right? These people have gone through law school, right? At least 3 years of law school. That means that they're highly educated, highly motivated, intelligent individuals. In the past, these people, in a world with less competition, they would have been preeminent scholars in their own communities. But today, they're just discarded applications, right? We will never see, well, at least, and I'm being a little bit dramatic, but we will never see perhaps the full genius of some of these people, because they're never going to be given the opportunity. I'm part of the problem, right? I'm not giving them the opportunity, but I don't have to, because of the problem of supply and demand. There's just too much supply. Law schools are churning out too many students. The universities are churning out too many students. There's too many people being educated, competing for the same spots. So you're not going to get those spots because there's just too many other people who want those spots. And that's collective competition. That's where there's too many people competing for the same things, all of whom are more or less qualified. And this is more of a recent phenomenon. I don't think in the past we had this phenomenon, at least not to this extent, where you had so many educated people competing for these fewer spots, fewer resources, if you will, fewer positions. So as a result, what happens when you have collective competition? Well, you have a situation where some people get discouraged. Some people are disincentivized to work or to fully express themselves and to fully reach their own potential. Some people quit. Some people self-deselect from the labor market or from other markets, perhaps. and they end up working menial jobs. They end up working some low-end 9-to-5. They don't fully reach their potential. They're absorbed by the system and they become cogs in the wheel, which is sad because it's a waste of human potential. But that's the type of society we live in right now. Well, why is that? Well, there's just too many people. By some accounts, 7% of all of the humans, all of the Homo sapiens, all of the humans who have ever lived are walking the earth today. By some accounts. Now, it's hard to estimate the exact number of humans who've ever lived. This is an estimate, but by some accounts, 7%. That is astounding. You know, we have, last time I checked, somewhere between, I know, 8 to 9 billion people. Something like that, right? I may be off by a little bit, but, you know, 8 to 9 billion people right now on the planet. 7%. 7%. Wow, that's almost 1 in 10. 1 in 10 people, almost. Let's just call it 1 in 10, just for the argument of this video. 1 in 10 people that ever lived, exist today, are walking the earth today. Now that's a lot of people, and I don't think our human mind and our human sort of the way that we feel and the way that we think and the way that we're programmed, if you will, it's conducive to the expression of genius when there's so many other people competing. So let me try to rephrase what I'm trying to say. Like, we get discouraged, right? If you live in a world where there's less competition and you have a community and you are the best drummer in your community, you are recognized as a genius, right? Because you are the best drummer, and there are no other communities that you're aware of because you live in an isolated community. You don't have freedom of information. There's not a lot of competition. You are the best. You are the genius. Or you are the best writer. You're the best scientist. You're the best engineer. You're the best warrior. You're the best something. And you're easily recognized by a small group of people that you are the best, the pinnacle of this, the best doctor, the best healer, the best priest, right? And you are recognized as a genius in a smaller community or a simpler time. And that feels good, right? That feels good, to be recognized. And this is where I'm talking about human psychology. This is what I'm trying to get to. That in terms of human psychology, that's an incentive. From the perspective of human psychology, that is an incentive to do more, to produce more, because you are being given positive feedback from your peers. And that's a really, really, really important incentive. Positive feedback from your peers. Works of genius are usually not created in isolation, right? Think of the pandemic that we lived through, right? Were many works of genius produced because we were in lockdown? Certainly we had a lot of time. I don't think many works of genius were produced. I think most people just bummed around and didn't do much during the lockdown. Some people produced works, I guess, but not everybody just started writing novels, that's for sure. We turned to Netflix for distractions instead. And I'll be talking about the distractions later, because that's a huge part of what I'm going to talk about today is distractions. But it's not like we suddenly created all these geniuses because we had the time. So I'm getting a little bit distracted here, and I digress. But what I'm trying to say is that positive feedback is so important to be recognized by one's peers, and that encourages us to produce more work. And this is what I'm saying by works are not produced in isolation, right? If works were produced by people in solitary confinement and it just works that are produced in the abstract, then the prison environment would probably be the most conducive for geniuses, because they have so much time to think and just be on their own, right? But that's not how geniuses are made, and because you have to encourage genius and foster and cultivate genius, and it's the positive feedback from one's peers that for the most part, and part, of course, the economic motivation, right? Money that you get from producing good work. But most geniuses, I don't think, were motivated primarily by money. They were motivated by other higher needs and higher incentives than money. But I think the primary one is self-fulfillment and pride in one's work. But an even stronger motivator, I believe, is feedback, is positive feedback, recognition. There is nothing more exhilarating than recognition for some people, being recognized as producing great works. And when you don't have that, when you have so much collective competition where you can't really stand out relative to your peers, you are discouraged, right? Human psychology dictates that. We become discouraged, and as a result of being discouraged, we stop producing, or we settle. We settle for mundane jobs, and we believe, and this is a false belief, but we believe we are mundane or normal, or we are, we are not meant for the life of a genius, and we self-deselect, which is quite unfortunate, but that's the result of collective competition. I will note that collective competition is different from what I define as individual competition. Individual competition can actually inspire works of genius. Individual competition is when, for example, you have two people, or maybe a small group of people, but usually two people who are rivals, and they're competing against each other, and that could actually incentivize the production of works of genius. Famous examples would be Michelangelo and Raphael, right? They were rivals in Rome at the time during the Renaissance. Michelangelo was painting the Sistine Chapel. Raphael was working on the School of Athens. He was painting certain rooms for the Pope. And they were rivals because they were both really, really good, but their styles were different. And that rivalry, in part, helped generate some of their best works.
So I'll start scanning in about 10.
Raphael even gives a little bit of acknowledgement to Michelangelo, where Michelangelo, at least according to many scholars, is seen in the School of Athens as one of the figures. All right, he's on the steps underneath Socrates and Aristotle and Plato in the School of Athens, in his famous painting that adorns one of the walls in the Vatican. So, individual rivalry, and you think of individual rivalries in athletics as well, in sports, for example, Larry Bird and Magic Johnson, right? These two people who inspired each other, and they encourage each other to be better through that individual competition. You see lots of examples of this throughout history, but collective competition is very different. It's not you versus a rival, right? Where you're both trying to outcompete each other and produce better works, and that produces works of genius. But and it helps elevate both competitors in that sense. There are many examples of that. Correct me in the comments if I'm wrong about this, but I think there was quite a competition between Picasso and, was it Manet? Or was it Matisse? I don't remember. Maybe it was Matisse. But they were artistic rivals, and and certainly, there's throughout history there's these intellectual rivalries between often just two people who have different styles, and they're trying to outdo each other, and that produces genius. But collective competition, no, it actually suppresses genius. So that's one of the, I believe, one of the primary reasons why we're actually producing fewer geniuses, is that we have more qualified, educated people. When we're actually self-deselecting, we are creating disincentives. Now let's go on to some other theories. If you research this topic of why there are so few geniuses, some other theories are proposed. There's an author who talks about decadence. That's his terminology, decadence, in that we're just not very creative anymore. Well, we've stopped producing because we now live in a world of excess, a world of entertainment, a world of hedonism. So there are authors or groups of authors, intellectuals who subscribe to this idea that we in the current world live in a world of decadence, and it's just we're too obsessed with pleasure. I mean, we're stagnated And as a result of the stagnation, we're not producing geniuses or intellectuals worthy of the past. So that's one theory. There's another theory on education, which is how we're educated. So because we have large lecture halls in universities and very education that's not very personal. The theory goes that in the past we had something called aristocratic tutoring, which is one-on-one tutoring, like more one-on-one education where someone would actually sit down with you. So the word, it starts with a P, it's escaping me, I think pedagogical, I think that's the word, pedagogical model that we are using now with large lecture halls and universities, and sort of impersonal education is not conducive to the creation of geniuses because it's mass-produced sort of education, right? Mass-produced assembly line education where everybody gets the same education. There's lack of creative thought, lack of individual mentorship. So that's another theory. Now, I have a theory with respect to why there are now fewer geniuses perhaps in the scientific world. And this theory is echoed by some other scholars as well. I personally call it the Mount Everest theory. So the Mount Everest theory goes something like this, and I'll explain why I use the term Mount Everest. So I'll give you the analogy first. Now, when you're climbing Mount Everest, and most mountaineers will I think agree with me here, that the very end, the very top of the summit, that's much harder than the first couple of steps from base camp, right? The first, and it takes a couple of days to get to the summit, but the first steps and the first couple of days are much easier, and you can do more, right? I think it just has to do with the slope or the pressure or the lack of oxygen or something, the way that the mountain's set up. I'm not a mountaineer, but the way the physics of this mountain is that it's much easier. You can go much further in the first couple of days. So you can go longer distances the first couple of days as you make your way up the mountain. But then the summit, as you get closer to the summit, you're moving at a glacial pace, right? It's much harder, and it's so difficult to get to the very top. And many people quit just miles away from the very top. Like you can see the summit and they quit. It is what I've been told by certain mountaineers, that it's just harder and harder and harder to climb. So this mountain is easier at the bottom and harder. It inclines in such a way, both physically and I guess metaphorically at the top, where it's much harder. So I think you understand where I'm going with this. At least with scientific thought, and this may apply to other disciplines as well. The Mount Everest theory applies because it's now much harder to create new paradigms, to change scientific thought, to bring scientific thought forward individually as one person. In the past, with people like Newton and obviously Einstein, it was possible that one person could change a scientific paradigm. And back in the day, and I hinted at this, there was just less that was known, right? So if you think of Darwin, he was known as a naturalist, right? Naturalists were what we would consider zoologists, botanists, to an extent philosophers, like natural philosophers to an extent. They were a cross-discipline between many things, right? The discipline of psychology didn't really exist until Freud, right? It was considered something else, maybe part of philosophy. But a lot of, like modern physics didn't exist until, in the last century and a half, perhaps. Many disciplines that we take for granted, they just ceased to, they didn't exist. They were because knowledge was not specialized enough, right? There was not enough understanding of science in the past, and it was easier for some genius to arise, a Darwin, a Newton, these types of people, of Copernicus, to come out of the darkness and shine a light on something that nobody knew, because nobody knew, and there was very little that we knew. So that's the base of the mountain, right? It's a little bit easier to climb the base of the mountain, but as you climb now it's harder, it's harder and harder. Now you have to, first of all, understand previous centuries of knowledge. You have to study and absorb that. And to then make a contribution, it's even harder, right? Because of the incline. And this is the Mount Everest theory. And I think this is an apt analogy for our current state of scientific progress. If you look at most scientific progress nowadays, it's done by teams of people, right? These people who are writing these brilliant scientific papers, and it's incremental. It's not like we're changing a new scientific paradigm where we've found something really amazing. It's incremental, marginal improvements to our understanding, marginal discoveries. They're very marginal, and they involve large teams of people. If you think about it, like it would take years for a scientist to get their PhD, and then many other years working in a lab somewhere as part of a team to just make that incremental jump for human knowledge. It's much harder, much harder. To an extent, and in a way, it was easier for someone like Newton to come up with the theory of gravity at the time when the disciplines of science were much less evolved. Obviously, it was difficult because of the environment for someone like Newton, because it didn't exist. So you needed someone to be so much of a genius to actually be, I've thought of something that no one else has thought of, because no one else yet has thought of it. Right? You were the first, and that's the mark of true geniuses. But now it's hard to come up with original thoughts, right? With certainly with science, I've talked about this incremental improvement, these marginal improvements to scientific thoughts developed by mostly teams of people rather than some individual scientist who is just so brilliant that they themselves can create great works. Even Newton himself said, the reason I could see further is because I stood on the shoulders of giants. But I think to an extent, if the giants are too large, even standing on the shoulder of giants, you're not going to become a giant yourself, right? You're just a little dwarf standing on the shoulders of giants, and then you have to learn this giant school of knowledge. That's just the way the scientific world works right now. So it may be virtually impossible for there to be a single person in science nowadays to stand out as the genius. As well, in literature and in art, is there I was once told by my English teacher, there's no such thing now as an original thought, right? I mean, if you look at the works on TV, on Netflix, on what you're reading, like very few original thoughts. Everything's recycled, right? There's very few works of genius. It is because it's all redone and rehashed. We've done it before. We've seen that plot. We've seen that narrative arc. It's been done before. We're just copying the past. It works, certainly. It works because traditions are experiments that succeeded. So it worked, but we're just recopying it, we're regurgitating it. It's theme and variation on the same old stuff that we did in the past, and that's why, as we look at some of the artistic works of the present, it seems just copy and paste, right? And maybe it is just copy and paste. So certainly that's lack of genius, but maybe it's because there's just been so much good stuff that's produced in the past that we have no choice but to copy it. But at the same time, that's not an incentive for original thought. Now, if you don't have original thought, you can't be a genius, because I think as a precondition to being a genius, you must have an original thought. You can't be a genius by copying others. Then you're just transcribing at that point, but you're not a true genius. Now, I want to talk about another element, but I'm going to move, I think, just out of the way. There's a little bit of construction noise in the background. They're maintaining some building here in Trinity. But I want to talk about distraction. So that's another, another element that's very poisonous to genius, which is the type of distractions that we have now. people don't really think anymore. They don't really take time to think about an issue. We have an unlimited supply of entertainment and distractions with social media, Facebook, Instagram, text messaging, all these streaming services, unlimited entertainment at our fingertips, the internet to an extent. Right, if you want to be distracted by TikTok or or just some I'm naming services that, if you watch this video 10 years or 20 years from now, these services may not even exist anymore. But this is 2024, so I'm naming some of these platforms and apps that exist as of 2024. These are sort of distractions. Many people spend hours and hours on their phone, on their mobile devices, being entertained and distracted by videos, by mainly just entertainment that doesn't produce anything. I don't think it makes you smarter. Or television. I think most television programs I don't think make you smarter. In fact, it probably makes you, depending on what you're watching, a lot of it makes you dumb. So I honestly, if television and and social media made you smarter, I think most people in the world would be geniuses. But right, most people are not. They're not geniuses, and I think a large part is a distraction, because we have these apps and we have these platforms that have created an environment where we were almost dependent and addicted to being distracted, and that's how we relax, and that's how we spend our pastime, right? We don't spend it in deep thought. We don't spend it reflecting. We spend it instinctively, and we may not even recognize that we're doing this. We spend it in the pursuit of distractions and entertainment, and that's the antithesis of genius, because you're not producing original thought. You're not producing anything of intellectual value. You're just distracting yourself. You're entertaining yourself. It's hedonistic. You get that dopamine rush, right? And it's not our fault. The world and these tech companies and the media companies and the people selling these programs, they designed these programs and apps and television shows and streaming platforms. They designed it this way to be addictive, right? For monetary means. Like, we're victims, really. We're all victims of social media, of television, of this type of design. It was intentionally designed to keep us hooked. And one of the results is that as a complacent population, not recognizing this particular phenomenon, we have all become, to an extent, hooked. So let me tell you a story. And this is what happened in the past relative to what's happening in the present in the world of distractions. So there was an 18-year-old lady. She went to a cottage, over a weekend with her husband and two of her friends, and they isolated themselves in this cottage. And for fun, they told ghost stories, and they said, "Okay, let's do a writing challenge. Write a story." Right, and they had a couple of days in this cottage. They were a bit isolated, so they would challenge each other to write a story, and they took their time, in this cottage, to think and to be creative and to use their imagination, and they wrote stories each. The lady who is the subject of this story, her name is Mary Shelley. Her husband, Pierce Shelley, famous poet and author. The friends they were with included Lord Byron. And Mary Shelley, her story was Frankenstein. She wrote Frankenstein in this cottage. Yeah, Frankenstein. The famous story, Frankenstein. She had a creative moment. They were isolated in this cottage, and they used their imagination. This was 1816. She published Frankenstein 2 years later. And it's a work of genius. It's recognized as one of the foundational works of sort of modern horror, and I think it's a work of genius. And she did it isolated in a cottage over a weekend. Right? Like, but can you do that? Can you isolate yourself in a cottage over the weekend without your phone, without your TikTok, without your Instagram, without your social media bullshit? Can you do that? Do you have the will and the discipline to shut down your Netflix, to isolate yourself and engage in an act of creativity, to use your mind? You probably don't know how to do that anymore, because we've lost the ability to be creative. Not in that sense. I mean, we copy and paste a lot, and certainly creativity still exists, but that type of pure accessing of one's imagination in modern society, we are discouraged from doing that. And I think for a lot of us, we've lost the ability to do that. In the same way that with the invention of the calculator, we've lost the ability to do manual math, right? Mathematics and calculations in a manual way. We've just lost the ability. With text messaging and typing, we've lost the ability to write in cursive and to actually write with our hand on a piece of paper. We've lost that ability. I mean, this may be a silly analogy to an extent, but with the car, we've lost the ability to ride a horse, right? Like, and that's a bit of a silly analogy, but it's this idea that we're losing skills, and we're losing intellectual, mental skills as well. And one of which is actually being able to access our imagination and to engage in long periods of thought, of true, genuine thought, without being distracted, without having to post it on social media, right? You can tell I'm not a big fan of social media, not traditional social media in the way that it's just a distraction and entertainment, and that's not. And you see that my content obviously is longer and more intellectual, and you know, I call it long form, what I'm doing, right? There's short form, right? Short 1-minute clips to entertain people. Long form is like, I actually want people to sit down and listen to this. And I'm doing this mainly for myself, but I want people to sit down, listen to this, and come up with your own conclusion, and also to engage in genuine thought of your own, right? Long form is important, right? Short form is what we're used to, because it's very easy for platforms to display short form, right? It's just short, everything's short, 30 seconds, 1 minute, minute and a half. We're losing our attention span, right? Collectively as a society, and as humans, right? Psychologically, in terms of how we access and interpret, and how we digest knowledge, we're losing our attention span, right? Our attention spans are very short. If we don't get to the point immediately, we don't have the patience to actually sit through something. Right, the songs on the radio are so short, right? It's back in the day, songs were longer, symphonies were much longer, but now everything has to be 3 minutes because it has to fit between commercials. We live in this commercial, as one person would, as one person would say, microwave society, right? Everything's pre-ordered. It's ready to eat, microwave society where everything's a pre-ordered frozen meal. In a way, intellectual goods have become pre-ordered microwave meals. They're ready to eat, heated up, ready to eat it. Very simple, but contains very few nutrients. So there are very few intellectual nutrients in these distraction, entertainment, media platforms and media items and these things that we're consuming now, very low intellectual nutrients. So the power of pure thought has waned. The power of imagination has waned, and I think I lament that, because that is one of the reasons. I think one of the primary reasons why we're seeing fewer geniuses, and also, if you look at young people, certainly they're not encouraged to engage in thought and imagination. They're encouraged to do the opposite, to be on their devices, their iPads, their mobile phones, their games, computer games. So that could be spelling the death of genius. Okay, I'm going to move on to the third perspective, which is this currently this time and place right now, 2024, or around this time and place, this era that we're living in, is this the end of genius because of the rise of artificial intelligence? and other sentient beings? Like, are we living in the last generation of human thought, right? Of human genius and of human achievement, even. ChatGPT, which has only been around for about 1.5 years, maybe 2 years, I think 1.5 years. I mean, that was a game changer. That was an absolute game changer in that you don't really need to write anymore, right? As it gets better, you may not need to write anymore, right? And there could be different models of ChatGPT, and with certain platforms like DALL-E, and Mid-Journey, like you don't need to create art anymore. Like the system creates art, the artificial intelligence creates art for you. ChatGPT writes for you. Right, when we have systems now that will become fully functional very soon, that are already in its nascent stage, that will create full videos for you. Right, it's only a matter of time. Right, these platforms are still a little bit in their nascent stage, but in a few years, full videos. Full deepfakes, where you can't distinguish humans from artificially intelligent humans, right? So in a world where everything's being created by artificial intelligence, there would be a further disincentive for humans to even create anything, right? So do you need geniuses, and can you even produce geniuses in a world where artificial intelligence is producing works of art that can then be appreciated and digested, although the art may be a bit soulless, but it can be functional. So think of a novelist, right? Like, if you could just create a novel using artificial intelligence, and suppose the technology in a couple of years gets to the point where you can create a full novel very easily, just give it a prompt. Is there an incentive to sit down for 3 years and to write a novel? Like, think about that. Is there an incentive to sit down and think of the cost of doing so, right? You're going to have to take time off to actually write this novel. It's going to take you 3 years. You're not going to get paid in the meantime. Do you sit down, you write that novel in the hopes that you'll make it big? Or do you get some future artificial intelligence, some ChatGPT type program to write the full novel for you, and it takes 5 minutes, right, or less, to write a full novel? 500 pages of text that actually makes sense, right? That's readable, right? And you generate a couple of these, and then you're actually just sheer volume generating a couple of good works, some of which could even be considered genius works, maybe, right? If we live in a world like that, and we're very close, it's not if, it's when we live in a world like that, what happens to that novelist, or what happens to that artist who can paint for a year to create this wonderful painting? I mean, in the past, people would paint for years to create these gorgeous works of art, right? We've lost that skill. So is there an incentive for future artists, for musicians? Once artificial intelligence can create full symphonies, full works of music with a prompt, and then you just have to select the best one, right? Then it's more about selection rather than about creation. It's just about choosing. It's like going shopping for the best intellectual work. So I guess there's some level of choice, but that type of exercise in human interaction is a little bit like flower arrangement, right? It's like, I think it's a somewhat low level of human expression. Not to diss anyone who does flower arrangement professionally, but the flowers are there. You're arranging them. You're choosing the flowers, but you're not creating the flowers. You're just arranging them, right? So it's a bit like that in the future, where yes, there is going to be maybe some human interaction where you're selecting the best works. It's like, but the intellectual task at that point is somewhat equivalent to flower arrangement, right? It's all there. You just have to put it in the right order and choose the best arrangement. Voila, it's not that hard. But you're not creating anything at that point. Not in the traditional sense, you're not. So if you're not creating anything, is there an incentive for you to create? Is there an incentive for humans in future generations, once artificial intelligence becomes fully sentient and is now creating on its own, and maybe even motivated on its own to create, and we're competing with these works of art, works of literature, works of music, works of scientific thought in every discipline, right? I'm probably missing a whole number of disciplines here, but in every discipline where artificial intelligence surpasses us and is now creative in that it is actually creating in a sentient way, what incentive is there left for us, good old Homo sapiens, to create anything? If we go back to that artist that I'm talking about, or the musician, or the writer, would you spend 3 years of your life, or a year of your life, or a decade of your life creating that work? Especially if you're not getting paid for it in the meantime? Is there an incentive for you to do that? I think for most people there's no incentive. I mean, it's just too easy. Why would you cook when you have a microwave dinner that is, in a way just as good? And that's very dangerous. It's a very dangerous path that we're going down, in that if we lose the incentive to create, and we lose the incentive to even want to try to be geniuses, then there will be no more geniuses. And this may be actually the last generation of humans who can even be geniuses, because in the future, nothing you can create will surpass the works created by artificial intelligence. When we see this type of discouragement in, for example, in competitive games like chess and Go more recently, where you have chess players who quit after being beaten by artificial intelligence. Now, we're talking about the earlier days, right? When chess players would just say, like, that's it, that's the end of my career. Nowadays, there's some recognition of some coexistence, but certainly in the earlier days, some people quit, and certainly in Go, a South Korean Go master who was the preeminent and most famous and most decorated South Korean and international Go player. Go is a game, an Asian game that is not similar to chess, but it's a board game. Well, not a board game, but it's a competitive game using little pebbles. And he lost against AlphaGo, which was an artificial intelligence created specifically, essentially, to beat him in a competition, and he quit after. This champion. He was so discouraged, and he said after that there was no way that he could be the best, because now there is something out there that can beat him, and he lost his incentive to even compete in the future, which is really sad. And you're going to see that with a lot of humans who are just going to quit. And feel like, well, I can't be the best. I can't even be competent because the machines are doing a better job. So what incentive is there? And this goes back to my comments about incentive earlier on in the video. When you don't have incentive, it's highly dangerous. And we're creating a world where we are putting a lot of cold water on human incentive, on motivation. And if humans don't feel motivated, then you can't create works of genius. Even though if you're, people have always been, in our population, what I'm saying is that we certainly have people who are smart, right? Who have the genetic tools to potentially be one of the key. Let's put it this way: who have the genetic tools to potentially be a genius, right? Who certainly have the genes of intelligence and the ability in their minds to actually do it, but it takes more than genes and genetic superiority, right? You need to actually create the work. You need to be incentivized to create the works. You need to have time. You need discipline and hard work, right? The genetic, the nature, if you will, it's nature and nurture, right? Nature and nurture. The genes themselves are not enough. You can have a lot of smart people who are born smart and have the potential, but if you don't have the right environment to foster that human potential, you're going to get nowhere. These people are going to feel discouraged. And the machines, they're certainly going to create a system where a lot of people who normally would have been geniuses, perhaps, right? Certainly they would have the intelligence, the IQ, the natural gifts to be geniuses, they would fail to be geniuses because the machines would have done the work for them. And they would be left discouraged, and who knows what would happen to these groups of people. But that's the world where we are walking towards. And very quickly, it's going to happen in my generation, in my lifetime. I don't know what the future looks like, but that's going to be a huge issue. So this could be the end of genius, as we know it, of human genius in its current form. We could be at a pivotal point in human history, where in the future human geniuses will be outclassed and surpassed by machine geniuses, if we could even use that word, or just by machines in general, creative machines. And we fail to be a creative class, and creativity outside of doing it as a hobby becomes relatively meaningless. It's a dark future. So that's one perspective. It's a dark future. I hope that doesn't happen, but that's a potential outcome, this dark future. I hate to end on that note, so I will be more positive, and I will say that if there's anything I learned from making this video, is you have to find your own incentives, right? You have to find your own incentives to be the best version of yourself, to express your own genius. And even if all these negative things were to happen, then be the best, smartest version of yourself. Engage in original thought. Think about issues. Think about life. Think about things deeply. Right? Don't be distracted. Take your time. Think about things. Express your thoughts. Yeah, be the best version of yourself. I've always believed in that. I've always believed that human potential should not be wasted. So if you have potential, express that potential, whether it's athletic, intellectual, artistic, social. Be the best version of yourself. Express your potential. Even if you can't be a world genius, a historically recognized genius, be your own genius. Right? Be your own genius. Just express your own genius in your daily life, among your friends in your community, and feel good about yourself. I think that's a more positive way for me to end this video, rather than a dark, apocalypse of artificial intelligence taking over. I hope you enjoyed this video. Again, this is beautiful Trinity College in Dublin, Ireland, an amazing place of intellectual thought. My hands are getting tired from holding this camera for the last hour. As you can see, the sun is up. It's always quite rainy here in Ireland, but today the sun is up. Life is good. Don't forget to like and subscribe. I hope you enjoyed this video. I hope you learned something about genius. I hope you managed to express your own genius. Be the genius you were meant to be. Live life, be smart, and I will see all of you in the next video. And goodbye for now.